It was late autumn, and the city streets shimmered under the pale glow of streetlights. David Morgan, a successful businessman in his early 40s, sat in his study, nursing a glass of scotch and feeling an unfamiliar tension coil in his chest. Life had always seemed predictable: marriage, career, social obligations, but tonight, that sense of stability was fraying. He heard the soft click of the front door, followed by the familiar sound of someone moving quietly through the hall. Emma, his wife, was upstairs preparing for the evening gala, her laughter echoing faintly. He should have felt content, but instead, his mind wandered to the man who had recently become part of their lives, Adrian, their new chauffeur. Adrian was nothing short of magnetic. In his late 20s, with a lean build and an effortless charm, he had a way of commanding attention without even trying. David had first noticed him during a brief glance while Adrian handed over the car keys. Something about the way he moved, the subtle confidence in his gaze, made David's heart race in a way he hadn't felt in years. At first, he tried to dismiss it as mere curiosity, a fleeting attraction that would fade. But the feeling had persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. It started innocently enough. David would find himself lingering near the driveway, watching Adrian polish the car or adjust the mirrors. Small gestures, like the way Adrian tucked his hair behind his ear or smiled politely when David gave instructions, sparked a warmth David couldn't explain. He chastised himself silently. He was married, a devoted husband, or at least he had been devoted. Yet, the allure was undeniable, a whisper of temptation he couldn't ignore. The opportunity presented itself on a night Emma had gone out for the gala. David had an errand to run across town, and unusually, Adrian was asked to drive him. As they slipped into the sleek black sedan, the atmosphere was charged with unspoken tension. "Long day, Mr. Morgan?" Adrian asked casually, his eyes briefly meeting David's in the rearview mirror. "Yes, you could say that," David replied, trying to sound nonchalant. But his voice betrayed a tremor he couldn't hide. The ride was mostly silent, the hum of the engine filling the space between them. David found himself stealing glances at Adrian, noting the curve of his jaw, the sharpness of his cheekbones, the way his fingers gripped the steering wheel. Every subtle movement drew David in, like a moth to a flame. Without thinking, David's hand brushed against the leather armrest near Adrian's. The touch lingered longer than necessary, and he felt the subtle shift of Adrian's posture. A small, almost imperceptible smile flickered across Adrian's lips. "You know," Adrian said softly, breaking the silence, "I've always liked driving at night. It feels different." David's pulse quickened. There was something in Adrian's tone, soft, intimate, teasing, that made his stomach twist. He wanted to reach out, to say something reckless, something daring, but the words caught in his throat. By the time they arrived at their destination, neither of them had spoken another word. Yet, the tension between them was palpable, a quiet storm simmering beneath the surface. David knew he had crossed a line the moment he felt a pang of disappointment when the ride ended. That night, sleep eluded him. He tossed and turned, haunted by thoughts of Adrian. The desire was more than physical. It was intoxicating, consuming every rational thought. By morning, he realized he had to see him again. Not in public, not with the constraints of daily life, but alone, where the rules no longer applied. A week passed before David found himself alone in the house, once more. Emma had gone on an extended business trip, leaving him in the quiet expanse of their mansion. David's thoughts immediately turned to Adrian. He knew it was reckless, dangerous even, but he couldn't resist the pull. He sent a discreet message to Adrian, asking him to come by for a private discussion about the car. The reply was immediate, casual, yet laced with a subtle undertone David could feel in his bones. "I'll be there at midnight." The hours crawled by. When the clock finally struck 12, David heard the faint knock at the door. He opened it to find Adrian standing there, looking impossibly composed, yet the tension in his eyes mirrored David's own. "Trouble with the car?" Adrian asked, stepping inside. "Something like that," David replied, his voice low, strained. The words felt heavy on his tongue. As they moved to the garage, The silence was thick, charged with anticipation. David's hands shook slightly as he opened the hood, though the car was fine. He turned to find Adrian watching him, his presence overwhelming. Before he could stop himself, David reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Adrian's face. The touch lingered, and Adrian leaned slightly into the contact. A shiver ran down David's spine, igniting a fire he couldn't contain. I can't stop thinking about this, David whispered, the words tasting like forbidden fruit. Adrian's response was a whisper in return, soft and deliberate. Neither can I. The barrier broke. They moved closer, drawn together by an irresistible force. One hesitant touch became a caress. One caress became a kiss. It was urgent, hungry, and yet tender, a contradiction that only heightened the intensity. Hours passed in a haze of stolen touches and whispered confessions. Every boundary, every moral constraint, was abandoned in the heat of the moment. In Adrian's arms, David felt alive in a way he hadn't in years, as if the monotony of his life had been stripped away to reveal something raw and essential. Days turned into weeks, and their encounters became increasingly daring. Meetings in the dead of night, fleeting touches in the car, stolen moments in hidden corners of the mansion. They existed in a private universe, a dangerous, thrilling secret. Yet, the guilt gnawed at David relentlessly. Every time he saw Emma, every time he heard her laughter or saw her smile, a pang of remorse cut through the pleasure he found in Adrian's embrace. He was living a dual life, balancing desire against conscience, and the tension was unbearable. One night, after a particularly passionate rendezvous, David found himself alone in the study, staring at the reflection of his own conflicted eyes in the window. The exhilaration of forbidden love clashed violently with the guilt of betrayal. He knew this could not continue forever. Adrian sensed it too. As they lay tangled in the dim light, he brushed a hand over David's face and whispered, "We can't keep doing this without consequences." David nodded, feeling the weight of truth settle over him. The reality was unavoidable. Desire had led them down a path from which there was no easy return. And yet, the memory of Adrian's touch, the thrill of stolen nights, lingered, haunting him with every beat of his heart. In the end, David realized that passion and loyalty were often incompatible. Some fires burned too brightly to be contained, leaving ashes of regret in their wake. And though he would always remember Adrian, the man who had awakened a part of him long forgotten, he knew that some secrets were too dangerous to hold for long. The chauffeur's secret had revealed more than temptation. It had exposed the fragile boundaries of love, fidelity, and desire. And as David returned to the quiet, predictable life he once took for granted, he carried with him the bittersweet memory of forbidden passion, knowing some moments were meant to be treasured and others left behind.